Hey, it's TDA and welcome back to Techtonica. Today I'm going to show you how you can completely automate your facility so you no longer have to run around and do things manually anymore. However, in order to do that, you do need access to the water wheels that we currently have, as you can see, in order to completely automate your electricity. Now, before we get into that, I do want to point out that a simplified setup like I have over here, with just some assemblers where you throw in some stacks of materials and just have that work for a very long time, is actually very efficient as well. So if you don't want to completely go through the work that is required in order to completely automate everything, there's nothing wrong with doing it like this. This will require some manual work, but due to the stack sizes of things, it's actually not as bad as it may seem at first glance. And there's alternatives to this as well, where you can just set up a couple of boxes like I have over here and then have items split between different assemblers, things like that. There's a lot of different ways you can go, so this is definitely not the only way. However, I'm a little bit crazy and I like optimizing things, and having everything fully automated is of course completely optimal. So I do think that's a lot of fun. So let's dive into it. One last thing to note is that I got feedback from a couple of people on both these videos as well as the satisfactory ones that due to the field of vision being set to quite a wide angle, they were basically getting a little bit motion sick looking at some of the videos. Now, I'm not sure for how many people that holds. I actually don't have that problem myself, so it's a little bit hard to test what the optimal settings are, but I did reduce the field of vision now for these videos, so let me know in the comments if that still bothers you, if it's good now. Basically, let me know if you want any further changes or if it's fine like it is right now. Okay, so before you start building anything, making sure your platform is at the correct height is going to be very important. As I showed in the last video, you can actually build your power platform right on top of the water wheels as well as the crank generators, and they will get powered, as you can see right here. However, this might actually get you into a little bit of trouble because machines need to be placed at a certain distance from each other. That varies per machine, by the way. But apparently that also holds in a vertical direction. Just let me show you what I mean. If I want to be building a planter, I can build that on this platform just fine, as planters need at least one spacing from different machines. So as you can see, or actually they don't need any spacing. So they can be built pretty much anywhere. However, if I try to do the same thing with the thresher, as you can see, I now get an error message. Even though this is just a perfectly flat platform, it is too close to other machines. Specifically, it's now too close to the machines below it. Might be fixed later on, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if this is intentional or a bug. It is slightly annoying, but you can easily fix that by raising the platform just a tiny little bit, like I've done over here. As you can see, now I have a raised platform. It's one tile higher than it was before, and now I can actually build a thresher up there. Now, however, you do need to make sure that you actually connect this thresher to the platform that is connected to your machines. Otherwise, you won't actually have power, so make sure you keep that in mind. You might actually want to increase the height of the platform even one further, because even though the thresher needs to be, I think, 2 tiles apart from any other machine, there are a couple of them that I think actually need a longer distance, like the core composer over there. So bottom line is, make sure you raise your platform a little bit further than is strictly necessary to fit the crank generators under it, which is exactly what I've done over here. So all the old machines have been removed. Same with my entire setup that I had over here. Kind of hurt to do that. I did leave the core composers where they are, mostly because it's a pain to actually remove the cores, and I also kind of like these as a kind of monolithic statement to the progress that we've made so far, and they are quite central and nicely located. So even though they might get slightly in the way, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to keep them where they are. This does mean that actually I have my entire factory in a box now. So all the machines that we've made before, all the materials that we've gathered, just to make sure nothing got lost, I did collect them in these boxes over here. Which means we need to start building. And in order to start building, we need drills, we need iron, we need copper, we need, what is it, limestone. And in order to do that, we are going to need drills and smelters, and those actually require biofuel. So even though we have infinite electricity, we don't actually have infinite biofuel, so that means we're going to have to work towards that. And it also explains why I actually removed my previous mining setup, because we actually need to make sure we have a setup that we can supply fuel to completely automated, which is this one. And I'm actually kind of proud of this, because I think it's really neat looking, even though it's a little bit elaborate, but that is mostly because, well, that's just how the game works. So as you can see, we have drills over here, we have an outgoing belt over here, and on that outgoing belt is going to be limestone, because this is limestone drills over here. In order to actually get the amount of stuff that this will be producing onto a belt, we're going to need a fast inserter and a normal inserter to put the outputs on the belt. Now, I actually did a lot of testing to see what the speeds of different machines, different inserters, different belts were. I'm going to make a different video on that, so if you're interested in that kind of math, please look at the other video as well. But the bottom line is, in order to make sure that a upgraded mining machine is able to put all its stuff onto a belt, you're going to need one normal inserter and one fast inserter. You could also just make 2 fast inserters, but these actually cost power, so I just wanted to make sure that we're not using more power than we strictly need. These are actually also a little bit more expensive to make than these, so again, we're just saving on materials as well. Now, in order to get the fuel into the machine, we're going to need a second belt that actually supplies the fuel, and this is also where the long inserters come in. These actually transport items across a distance of 2 tiles, so this is why it will pick it up from this belt, but it will leave this belt alone. It will put it on this belt, and then this inserter will put it into the machine. Now, ideally, I would want it to directly put it into the machine, but unfortunately, as far as I know, we cannot do that right now. So this is why we need the intermediate step in between. Still, I think this looks pretty neat, pretty nice. So now all we need to do is make sure we actually have biofuel in order to make this completely automated. Now, the reason I'm starting with a limestone setup is because in order to make these biobricks, we're also going to need a limestone, and we're not going to be able to produce enough limestone just from making it from plants, as you will see in a moment. Why biobricks? Well, you could also use plant matter, mostly because biobricks are a lot more efficient. You make them from plant matter, but you actually get more energy out of biobricks than you get from the plant matter itself. And you can also upgrade the biobricks extensively. So basically these already start out more efficient than plant matter, but as soon as you start upgrading these, they will become even more efficient. Which brings us to plants, and specifically planters. So again, I did a lot of math to figure out how many planters do I actually need in order to fully satisfy a single thresher. Because remember, these plants that are going to be produced actually need to be threshed twice in different stages of the process in order to be completely be ready in order to make biofuel from it. There's actually a couple of more steps after that, but it starts with the first threshing. Now, the answer is it's complicated, because actually you need about 5.5 planters in order to fully satisfy a single thresher. So rounding that up to 6 just makes sure this thing will always be working. And this also allows for a little bit of downtime in between the plants being ready, being put on the belt, as well as being replanted, reseeded again. So all in all, I do think that having 6 is the optimal number, taking that into account. Now, what is happening over here? We have this outdoor belt over here that's just going to go all around. This just will have the seeds on it, and the seeds will then be picked up by these inserters and be put into the machine. And then as soon as the plant is ready, the plant will be put out on this belt in the middle. It will be put into the thresher, and in this case, a single inserter is enough. It will process it. It will produce 2 outputs, one of them being the seeds, and the seeds will be put back right on the belt to be replanted. And then the wood, doesn't actually have a name in the game currently, but I'm just going to call it wood, will be put on this belt as an output. Now, this is actually a pretty simple setup so far, but it's important to keep in mind that the threshing is actually going to produce a huge amount of materials very quickly. So we're going to need more belts and a more complex setup right after this, but basics first. It's a pretty good start, and I do really like how this layout looks. Which brings me to the second threshing part of this build, and that is the dual setup that I have over here. So the wood is again going to be put on this single belt, and there is 2 different places where this goes into a threshing machine, because each of these will actually only be able to handle about 20 wood per minute, and this is going to be producing twice that amount, so hence 2 machines. just using simple basic inserters in order to get that stuff in there. But then the real complexity starts, because these are again going to be producing two different types of outputs, and actually rather high quantities. These are going to be producing about 80 fiber per minute as well as 80 Kindle fine extract. That's actually more than fits on a single belt, so we need two outgoing belts. But because we want to split the items between two different belts, we actually also need the sorter inserters, and due to the speed those have, we're actually going to need 3 of each in order to make sure we can actually put all of that stuff on those belts. So we're going to need 3 outputs for each type of materials. That means that we have 3 fiber outputs on this side, and then it's slightly inconvenient because on the other side there's actually only 2 outputs. So we have those 2 outputs for Kindle fine extract, and we're using the 4th one on this side to again put out Kindle fine extract. So that means we have a Kindle fine extract belt going out in this direction, and we have a fiber belt going out in that direction. Similarly, we have an identical setup over here. So this is going to be Kindle fine extract in one direction and fiber in a different direction. Now we are not quite done yet, because we first of all need to transform the Kindle fine into a limestone, and we need to transform the plant matter fiber into actual plant matter, which is what we're doing here. And as you can see, there was a lot more stuff coming up, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it. So first of all, remember the kimberlite extract belt we had over here that combined those 3 inserters into a single belt over here? Well, we have 2 fast inserters over here in order to put it into a smelter. Now the problem with the smelter is it also needs fuel. So we're actually going to use the fuel that we're making in this build within the build itself to make sure this is actually going to run infinitely long. There's one downside, well, it's a minor downside really, but that does mean that we initially have to put in some fuel, even if it's just 1 single plant matter, well, likely a little bit more than that, but we only need to put in a very small amount of fuel in order to get it going before it will actually completely automate itself. Basically, as soon as the first bricks come in, this will take care of itself. Then, of course, we're not just making the biofuel for these smelters, we're going to use that elsewhere as well, which is where this additional belt comes in. This runs all the way down the side. And then the fuel is being put in this facility because we're probably going to be producing more than we need. But we do need some, and that is going to be put on this belt to go into these drills. So again, once this build is up and running, the limestone drills over here are actually going to be supplied by this build over here. But the limestone from these drills is actually being put on this belt, going in the exact opposite direction, and is then combined with the limestone we're making within the build, for a very simple reason. We're actually not making enough limestone within the build itself. We simply don't have enough Kindle fine extract to meet the demand. And then all of that is going to go down this line and go into this machine over here, and this is then using the limestone as well as plant matter in order to make biobricks. Now you might be wondering, where's the plant matter coming from? Well, of course, that is coming from these 2 assemblers that I skipped over here. So as you can see, we have this belt over here that's going to have a fiber. Then we have this other belt which comes from down here. It also has fiber. And then that fiber is being made into plant matter. And again, because the amounts that we actually are inputting are quite high, we need 4 different inserters. You could also do this with 2 fast inserters, but these ones are cheaper and they're not using any energy, so yeah, why not? And for the same reason, we have 3 inserters actually putting them back on the belt, and again, it's just cheap ones because they're good enough. And that goes down to the other side into this assembler as well. Now we're actually making more plant matter than we can use within this build right now, because we have a bottleneck in terms of limestone. You actually need a huge amount of limestone in order to make these recipes, and that's actually more limestone than we can put on a single belt. Now you could theoretically just make another lineup like this. You would actually need 3 more drills, I believe, and then have a secondary line, and then put a secondary assembler over here as well, making more biobricks. And then honestly, it gets really messy, and I do like the way this build looks now. It's really neat and organized. It's quite compact. It's almost square, which, as you probably know for my Dyson Sphere content, I really like my square builds, or rectangular build, I should say, probably. So this is easy to replicate elsewhere. If you put in the secondary assembler and all the different limestone belts, it doesn't really work as well. However, there's actually a way to kind of cheat this later on. If you have a Mark II belt, you could easily double up the speed of this belt and then just add the assembler in here right after this, and then basically move this box a little bit, and it's almost going to be square, and you can almost double up on the Biobrick production as well. As it stands now, however, this is actually not a problem, because what you can do if you want, I'm actually not entirely sure if I'm going to do this or not, you're going to have a surplus of plant matter. The plant matter is going to go in this box. That is where this box is for. However, plant matter is also fuel, so there's not really anything wrong with simply putting it on this fuel belt as well. And if you want to do that, you're probably going to have to move this one over and then just put some inserters there and just put the plant matter on the belt. Like I said before, it's not as efficient as using biobricks, but it burns, it works, and that way you're actually using the plant matter. What I'm going to do right now is just stock it up, and then at some point probably just handcraft some biobricks or make an assembler to do that or whatever, just to be more efficient. But yeah, like I said, if you just want to fully automate and make use of everything you're using in this build, or producing I should say in this build, just make sure that the remaining plant matter goes on this belt. So does this actually work? Well, I loaded up the smelters with some plant fuel, just some plant matter that I had left in my inventory. And now all we need to do is just drop in some of these seeds, and it should start functioning all by itself. Remember, the seeds get recycled, so you only need to put them in once. I do recommend actually putting in a second batch of seeds as soon as the first ones are done, just to make sure that you speed things up, because it takes a little while for the seeds to go all the way around. But yeah, we'll just need to wait about 2 minutes before these are done, but then we can see if it actually works. Okay, we have the first plants coming out, and honestly, even though it takes a little while for this build to actually get going, it should be pretty fast from here, because these things are actually being produced fairly quickly, as you can see. We have the first ones coming out already, being handed into the second thresher, and these are again going to go really quickly. As you can see, we have the kindle fine coming out, we have the fiber coming out, all on the correct belt, so that's good. This should start working now as well, so there you go, we have the first limestone coming in. And is this one working as well? Yes, it is. We also have some limestone coming out here pretty soon. And yeah, there we go. And we already have the plant matter coming out here as well, so now you can see why the limestone is the bottleneck, because yeah, this is a fair amount of limestone, it's just not a lot. And of course the drills are actually going to be supplied by the biobricks we're going to be making in this build. You could cheat a little bit and just fire them up already, which is probably the efficient thing to do. I just decided not to, just to show you this actually will completely function by itself, because we are producing limestone. It's not a lot, but we are producing limestone within the build as well, so it will get started by itself. And there we go, we have the first biobricks on the belt, and as I mentioned before, you can just use the excess plant matter as well. There's additional excess being produced at the moment, so it's not quite as bad as it looks right now, for the simple reason that we're bottlenecked on limestone. So yeah, this is going to be producing a nice amount of biobricks, as you can see. The main bottleneck again being the limestone being put into the machine, so we need to make sure we are actually filling up this belt completely as soon as possible. But other than that, as you can see, this is a huge amount of production already up and running. It's 10 of these biobricks every time it runs the recipe once, so it will be coming out in kind of bursts. But yeah, really happy about how this looks. And it's really easy to see this build will never run out of fuel, because we have plenty of that fuel already waiting on the belt towards the smelter. So this build itself is completely self-sufficient now. You can also see the seeds being recycled over here. And as you can see, we have a boatload of limestone now coming in from these drills, because again, they're being fueled. And we are producing way more fuel than we need, and that is of course going to be turned into something productive really quickly, because right now this is literally the only thing we're producing in this factory, and that is not going to stand for very long. However, I do think it's worth mentioning, or at least showing you, that the limestone is actually the bottleneck. As you can see, we have this fully loaded belt of limestone, and this is actually backing up a little bit over here, because we don't need these 3 these 3 drills entirely to fill this belt. It's actually more than a belt in terms of production. But as you can see, none of the limestone is actually reaching the end of this belt. This inserter doesn't even have something to do all of the time. So just proving my point that I said earlier, that limestone is really the bottleneck in this build. And if you would want to actually use this excess plant matter, then that is what you would need to fix. However, the excess is actually not that bad. You can already see that this is this belt is not backing up anymore or anything like that. And therefore we are actually using pretty much all the fuel. Well, not pretty much, we are using all the fuel that we are producing in this build, and it's a lot of fuel. Let's just check this box really quickly. I haven't actually touched it since I started this up. It's only like a few minutes ago. As you can see, we already have a lot of stockpile being collected here, and there's a ton of resources already on this belt. So these drills are not going to stop anytime soon. Well, they're not going to ever stop, unless for whatever reason this is actually filled up in terms of production, but that's a luxury problem. That means that at this point, if you have this set up, you have infinite electricity, you have, well, almost infinite biofuel. At least it's only limited by the amount of times you build this particular setup, and that means that at this point you're ready to completely automate the rest of your facility. Now, given how long the explanation of this build was, I am going to put some suggestions for the rest of your facility in the next episode, so make sure that you join me for that one as well. If you're still here, please let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this episode. You're awesome, and I hope to catch you in the next one.